Members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, persons tuned into this meeting via social media, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I welcome all of you to the continuation of Central Committee meeting number 23 for today, Monday, July the 6th. We have established a quorum of 11 members, and I invite you to stand for a moment of silence. And in this moment, I invite you to remember the parents, family, friends, classmates, teachers of the young life lost. No words can lessen the sorrow in a situation like this. However, we pray that the love and comfort of those around them may strengthen them during this time, and may they know that our prayers are with them. Thank you. I have received notice of absence from the member Otley and notice of lateness from the member York. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, of course you are aware of the recently established work group for digital transformation and AI, a mixed work group of Parliament. And you would have noticed throughout the Parliament building today that you are being asked to scan a code and complete a survey. This survey by the work group is to establish the level of literacy amongst all persons here in Parliament, members, staff, faction members, in order for us then to design a program suitable to Parliament based on the needs, the skills, the experiences that we already have in Parliament. So I encourage you to complete this survey. It's just a very short survey, but do it as quickly as you can so that the information can get back to the work group. And at the same time, I also encourage other businesses and government departments and offices to also have such a baseline study done in order to determine what are the requirements, the needs, as well as the skills that are already present in these different organizations so that we can bring it all together and, as far as Parliament is concerned, put a program together that will see Parliament, I hope, shoot ahead of the rest, so to speak, where AI and digital transformation is concerned. So I encourage you, the QR code is throughout the Parliament building for the members of Parliament staff and the faction staff as well to complete. I invite you to do so as soon as you can. I now look at the members of Parliament. We continue with notifications, of course, and I see that MP Lewis would like the opportunity for notifications. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I came as well prepared to give my sincere condolences to the family, friends, and fellow loved ones of the young life lost, Miss Artie. I wish them much strength in this time of bereavement. Madam Chair, as we are approaching to deal with the budget in a public meeting, we seem to still have situations where our island is still not in its cleanly of state that it should be. There's also a major issue that was also announced via Facebook with regards to Billy Folly Road, Madam Chair, which was just recently resurfaced in April according to the Post, and now there's a lot of filthy water running there, Madam Chair. I would like to announce or notify through this medium the Minister of Romy that he pay keen attention of his island, that he so swear to uphold and to protect or to give a service that he needs to give to the people of Sint Maarten, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I don't see the need for any further notifications. Yes, I see MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, SG. Good afternoon to my colleagues, and good afternoon to the viewing public. Madam Chair, I would like to echo your sentiments regarding the inviting the business community and the community as a whole to also do a sort of a baseline survey on the topic of AI. This year, our theme was building trust and exploring it, and I would like that or encourage businesses to also explore the possibilities of AI, but of course, in addition to the businesses, the government as a whole, to set an example. I know that we as Parliament, I agree with you, that we are going to take the lead, but then the government could be a close second. In addition to that, Madam Chair, I understood that the government has, that's a nice word, has not paid their bills in terms of rent. And there are a few departments now that have had an emergency situation and seemingly now staying over, seeking shelter over the Thailand building. I would really like some confirmation on this. We know we are in the budget debate time. We haven't gotten that information through the last presentation from the Minister of Finance in terms of not being able to pay rent. So it's a very unfortunate situation also to the owners of the building that the government cannot set an example in terms of paying what is owed, and just a very embarrassing situation, if that's so. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian. I now give the floor to MP Doran. MP Doran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you, my colleagues, Secretary General, and a special shout out to the people of St. Maarten that are tuned in. Madam Chair, I'd like to start by congratulating the valedictorian Gabrielle Pauletta of VWO MP of the Milton Peters College. And one of the parts that I really want to take out of her speech, which is basically the kern, the meat of it, is in her opening speech with the message, the race belongs not to the swift, but to those who endure it till the end, meaning we have to finish the race. Madam Chair, this ties so much into the fact that right now we're here dealing with a budget that is basically being forced down our throat. Last budget, I told the Minister of Finance, hartstikke spoed is zelden goed. When you rush and do things, it always ends up on the wrong side. We had to come back and, for the record in St. Maarten, debate the same budget twice. Not to sound like a broken record, Madam Chair, but here we are preparing, in my humble opinion, for a second failure in our budget. Madam Chair, it started with the confusion of this whole written hybrid system. You could say some things, you have to write certain things. Even when I speak to some colleague MPs in the coalition, genuinely trying to seek clarity, they can't even answer me, Madam Chair. The staff and the secretariat sometimes are also confused. I can see they're all stressed out. They were forced to put together a report within 48 hours. Midnight, we received a report of 200, almost 300 pages, 200 and something, to go through it, to have a healthy discussion here today. Madam Chair, nobody here had enough time to read that report. I'm saying all that to say, Madam Chair, we are going down the same rabbit hole again, and I foresee more issues. We pointed out 3 to 4 incidents where it have discrepancies in the budget. Last week to the Minister, I've seen more even after sending in my questions, which is fine because we have a public meeting to deal with. Madam Chair, my point is there is no method to the madness, and my question is, when will it end? Here we are right now being asked to make a decision or approve a report while we didn't even have ample time to go through it. The convocation is received on Thursday, therefore the report should have been received with a convocation. Of course, that was impossible based on the deadline set, but here we are rushing. My question to you, Madam Chair, why are we rushing and why aren't we given enough time to clearly go through the stuff, because we're dealing with the budget of country St. Maarten. We're not dealing with a hammer stick or something very simple, straightforward, based on whatever financial norms we need to fall in line with. We're dealing with the budget. My question to you, Madam Chair, why such a rush, and why not be given 24 hours at minimum to go through 300 pages? Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duran. The next MP to speak is MP Roseburg. MP Roseburg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Blessed afternoon to my colleagues present here today, to the Secretariat and Griffier, and everyone listening via the social streams. Just to add to what was said, Madam Chair, in regards to the young life that was lost, I would like to let everyone know that if you're dealing with any mental situation or you're struggling, here on Sint Maarten, we of course have the Mental Health Foundation, and there's a crisis line that you can call, which is 585-5556. And in the Netherlands, you also have a number 113, which you can call. And if you just would like to talk to someone or you're dealing with something, there is also a listening line that you can call to speak to someone, that the person can just listen to you. So just to add that to the possibilities of having someone to talk and or listen to you if you're dealing with something. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Roosberg. I now give the floor for notifications to MP Lacruz. MP Lacruz, you have the floor.
A blessed afternoon, Madam Chair, Lady Rifir, my fellow colleagues, and all those listening via social media. Madam Chair, Lady, I do understand somewhat what the previous speaker mentioned concerning the time that we had to go over the report that we received yesterday. I did not go over the report from everyone. What I did is I definitely went over my questions to make sure that those questions were in. Madam Chair, Lady, to my surprise, that was not the case. I have submitted a little over 1,070-something questions, and they were not all in. I then made sure to let the acting SG know that that was the case, and until now, my staff and myself, we are still trying to find all the questions in the jumble up story that was made and sent to us on paper. Madam Chair, Lady, I am and have always been the type to say, hey, you know what, if something is going to work and it's going to be easier for everyone, I'm for it, but I am totally against missing questions that I have taken my time to put together to send to Parliament. So I don't know what we're going to be doing here today because I have not finished going over that document, and I have already found that questions were missed. So I don't know what the plan is today. Thank you, Madam Chair, Lady.
Thank you, MP Lacruz. Without any other notification, we continue with this meeting, and it will become clear as I introduce the meeting. It will become clear what we are actually doing here today in this meeting. So we go over to the agenda point. It's the only agenda point for today because at the start of this meeting on Friday, June the 26th, the agenda points on this meeting, CC number 23, the agenda points 1 through 4 were handled and closed. The fifth agenda point, which is de Ontwerplandsverordening tot vaststelling van de begroting van het land Sint Maarten voor het dienstjaar 2026, which is our national ordinance number 192. And that is, of course, the national ordinance establishing the budget for the country Sint Maarten. As I mentioned, it was received by Parliament on the 11th of June. So that's the day we receive this draft ordinance, which contains the budget for the country Sint Maarten. We commenced with the meeting on Friday, June the 26th. At the time, the Minister of Finance was present and presented the draft budget in the Central Committee meeting to the Parliament. Members then had the opportunity, after some discussion about whether all questions should be done in writing or not, members had the opportunity to pose questions based on the presentation that was given by the Minister of Finance on the draft budget 2026. And then members were asked to submit their questions in writing on the draft budget no later than July the 2nd to the Secretariat of Parliament in order to draft the final report and put for ratification in a Central Committee meeting to take place today, July 6. Then, following this and in answering questions by members of parliament, the final report would be sent to the government for their handling and answering of the questions and comments by the factions in parliament. Because as customary, the questions that have been recorded in the report that we seek to ratify today is per faction. So all the questions by a faction and all the factions in parliament. That's the way the report is compiled. The meeting was adjourned on Friday, June the 26th, with the intention to continue on Monday, June the 29th, with other members who did not yet get the opportunity to pose their general questions. And this was done, and thereafter the meeting was adjourned in order for the Secretariat to await the submission of the written questions and prepare the draft final report. All the reactions by the factions, so this is the reaction with the questions by the factions, were received on July the 2nd, or it was indicated that they won't submit anything and would await the public meeting of Parliament. The draft report before us tallies 292 pages of questions. These are only the questions by members of parliament. I need to make that very clear, as if to make sure that it is understood that this draft report does not contain any answers by any minister. The 292 pages are the questions, one, as submitted by factions in writing to the Secretariat, and secondly, as was agreed and answered by me to a question by a member of parliament, the questions that were asked here in parliament on the same budget were also included in this draft final report. In fact, it was noted that some of the questions that were posed here verbally in the meeting were also part of the written questions by some of the factions. The questions submitted by the factions, if you look at it from a general perspective, reveal a common concern. Not whether government has plans so much, but whether it has the capacity, the financing, the governance, and accountability mechanisms to successfully deliver on those plans. As explained here in the meeting, the minister indicated that one of the accomplishments with this budget was that the government has moved further towards a policy-based budget. And the question formulated in different ways is, and what about the performance part? So budget, policy, what about the performance part? And if we look at all of the questions posed by members of parliament as submitted in the draft report of today of 292 pages, the 10 most prominent themes in the questions and comments from the factions are: 1, government's ability to execute the budget and the implementation capacity to do so; revenue generation and tax reform; healthcare sustainability and the general health insurance; fiscal sustainability, debt and liquidity risks; government-owned companies and corporate governance and transparency. 6, GB was mentioned by practically all factions as a special area of concern. Capital projects and infrastructure delivery, including timelines, has been asked for in some of the questions. Housing, roads, public infrastructure and their processes also. Social protection, poverty and cost of living, other areas of concern as expressed by a majority, if not all, of the factions. And then the need for stronger governance, including transparency, accountability, and performance measurements. As it regards the further planning after today, please note that once the draft final report on the draft budget 2026 is ratified, which has to happen, and hence this meeting continues today for the ratification, and I know I'm repeating it just to make it clear what is before us here at Parliament today. It is the ratification of the report of all of the questions, which is a requirement for the legal process of legislation to go through. Namely, when a draft ordinance is handled by Parliament, a written report needs to be made of the central committee. Questions, answers need to be received to that, which will be the answer by the government, and thereafter, that entire report will serve as a basis for the discussions in the public meeting on the ordinance. So once ratified, it will be sent to the government for further handling. It has been estimated, but which of course is left completely up to the government, but it has been estimated for a 2-week period for government to respond to the questions and comment in the final report. That is normally the time that is given, albeit that I would have to admit that we have not before, as far as my recollection serve me, dealt with this many questions on a budget or, in fact, on anything else, any other draft legislation in Parliament. So we are hoping as Parliament that the note following the final report, so the note of answers by the government, will be received by Monday, July 20th of this year. Let me make it clear. It is not the government that has indicated this will happen. We are anticipating that this could happen, and it's up to the government to indicate when the answers can be provided to Parliament for this discussion in a public meeting on the budget 2026 to continue. So, taking into consideration the number and the type of questions and the corresponding responses, which we will get, as well as the parliamentary recess, it is the intention to commence the public meeting for the handling of the draft budget 2026 on Tuesday, August the 4th, 2026. Informally, I have already heard from several members that they will not be here, whether on island or able to be at the meeting on that date. However, this information would have to be indicated officially as we continue to plan the continuation of the handling of the budget 2026. Because if we look at Tuesday, August the 4th for handling in a public meeting, if it goes according to the time frame that Parliament has before it, that would mean shortening the parliamentary recess by 1 week, actually, in order to address this matter. Should the note following the final report, so the note by government with all the answers to all of the questions, be received after July 20th, that would mean the public meeting will have to come later than August the 4th. We have shared this proposed timeline with the Council of Ministers, and this will be further discussed within the Council of Ministers and the government apparatus, and we shall then receive a response as to whether the timeline as we envision it is doable, yes or not. So today we are actually here to approve the draft final report from the Parliament, so with all the questions on the national ordinance stipulating the budget for country Sint Maarten for the year 2026. The draft has been shared, yes, yesterday, because the Secretariat, and I really need to take my hat off to the staff of Parliament, trying to meet today's meeting and having a report with all of the questions as posed by the factions of Parliament, having that report ready for ratification. The report needs to be ratified in a Central Committee meeting to be sent to the government, so to be sent to the ministers. I, of course, have taken note of comments by amongst others, MP La Cruz, regarding having scrutinized this document and found that several questions have not been mentioned. Several questions by the MP concerned have not been mentioned. I would ask the MP when he gets the opportunity to talk, if he so desires, if he can indicate which questions, according to him, are not mentioned in this report, because once again, I know that a thorough job was done by the Secretariat to include each and every question, not only those submitted in writing, but also questions posed in the meeting that we had on this topic before. So, members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, before you once again for the interest and information of the general public, you have before you a document that has been compiled with all of the questions by members of Parliament on the draft budget 2026, and this amounts to 292 pages. By the way, there was a part missing from the 287-page document that was 278, sorry, the document that we received last night of 278 pages. That document has been amended with a part of the questions indeed from the up faction. So the document that you have received now of 292 pages include a part from the up faction. And so I would ask the MP Lacruz again, when he gets the chance, to explain whether the additional part is or are some of the questions which he had not found back in the first document of 278 pages. So I would now give the floor to members of Parliament who wish to speak on the topic, and I see that MP Duran is requesting same. MP Duran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I asked a question in notification, but yeah, I know you're not obliged to answer there, so I'll just put it here. Madam Chair, again, I'm asking. Last night, you mentioned we received it yesterday. Yes, if we're being technical, yes, but when the email came in, I was fast asleep, which was after 11 p.m., almost midnight. So therefore, it's impossible to have reviewed it. I saw it this morning. Now, again, 2 o'clock, an amended version of the report was sent. I didn't even notice. So how is it possible we are being asked to approve something that we haven't thoroughly checked? Is it normal? Do you believe it's good? Because you mentioned the taking off your hat to the Secretariat, which I do too take off my hat to them. But why are you putting the Secretariat under so much unnecessary pressure, whilst we could have gotten it, 24 hours be given to review it at minimum, and that we could have a fruitful discussion? Or is it the intention, which I'm getting the feeling, to just breeze through this entire process, don't ask too much questions, let's just move forward, because we have to please the government for their, I don't want to use the word incompetence, but lack of attentiveness, maybe. And for me, Madam Chair, it's very distasteful, because you mentioned you never experienced so much questions. I've never experienced a budget being handled in this manner, and I believe that with all due respect, given your experience, you know better, and this is not the way we should be handling the people's business, especially when they have to do with the budget of Country Sint Maarten. I have reviewed a lot of the points that we brought forward as a faction in its entirety, and I've seen where most of the things come forward. Some things are missing, but it is humanly impossible to go through 300 pages in the time given. It's totally unrealistic, and I don't know if everybody else in here is cool with it. Maybe they had a meeting in the weekend and the coalition is cool with it, but I'm definitely not cool with it, and I hear the concerns from my MP colleague, Lacruz, as well. So I would like to know through you, Madam Chair, how will we move forward with this, with the most recent document being received 2 o'clock, yet we are expected to make a decision here and now? Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duran. I now give the floor to MP Roseberg. MP Roseberg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady. First of all, thank you for the explanation in regards to the possible timeline. What I do believe is that, as mentioned previously as well, we received the report yesterday, the day the update was received. but I believe seeing where we are now and seeing that this process has started, and we all have mentioned that we need to have a budget, and we can look at the past, but we are currently here. I believe seeing the AI mentioned method that we are currently exploring, it is possible to look at, and that's what I did as well with our faction, to look at if the questions that we have asked, because at the end, it's human work that is being done, so that we can be proactive and look at the questions that every faction has asked, to put it in an AI document and see if it has been covered or not, or if you're seeing that something is missing, that you can make that clear. If needed, we can maybe adjourn. And again, what I am saying by this document is an important document, but we have to make sure that at this moment, what the idea of this meeting is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, through you, Madam Chair, is to make sure that the questions that we have posed, and we all know the questions that we all have posed, that those questions are reflected in a document that has been presented. And I believe, but maybe the AI specialist can specify that if you put it in a document, it can come out what is missing and what's not missing. And I'm not trying to be funny because it's an important document, but what I'm trying to do is at this moment to be proactive so that you can move forward and get a budget approved or not. So that is where I'm at right now. Thank you, Madam Chair. But maybe you, seeing that you yourself are in that work group, and the other speaker that has requested the floor is also in the work group, maybe they can enlighten us and ask if that's a possibility and for us to move forward on that topic. Or if needed, we can adjourn so we can move forward and get it going. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. I now give the floor to MP Lacruz. MP Lacruz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, I am delighted to hear the previous speaker speak about AI, because at the end of the day, AI only gives you what you ask. And if you don't prompt the questions properly, you won't be able to get the answers you seek. And I've already started to answer the questions because I scanned the QR code. And one of the things, it is actually very important to teach the members of parliament what questions to ask your AI to be able to get the answers that you seek. So, Madam Chair Lady, I am not crazy, and I could read from my questions that I asked to General Affairs. Questions 17, 18 were not in the document. ECYS, question 35, 37, 39, 40, 50, 55, 56, from VSR 43, 44, 45, 46, 48, 49 from VSR 110. VRAMI 163, 167, 168, 170, 171 are just a few of those. Madam Chair Lady, my faction is now going over these questions with the acting SG from Parliament. And before I make a decision, and what I am asking for is, Madam Chair Lady, if we could get a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour time that everyone could go through this and make sure that their questions are in. Again, 1 hour max should be enough for everyone. And if I, who ask 1,072 questions, can do it in that time, I think anyone else should be able to do it. And Madam Chair Lady, some might ask for 24 hours, and they have all their rights. I asked for 1 hour because I started last night at 12 o'clock. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
MP Lacruz, that was it. I maybe missed your closing because I was just caucusing with our SG. So you did say that's it?
What is it, Madam Chair Lady?
I'm asking you, did you close your statement that you were making?
Yes, I said that we need more time to be able to go over.
I heard your proposal.
Yes.
I just was wondering if you had closed off your statement.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
And
Madam Chair Lady, I'm fully aware that at the end of the day, and the decision is yours, and that there's a majority over there that don't seem to mind pushing it through like this, but I find it very unfair. Okay? Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. I continue before I adjourn for a couple of minutes. I continue with MP Iran. MP Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, responding directly to MP Roseberg, I wasn't going to call any names, but since she made these comments, so I agree that we are promoting AI, etc., and I also believe in using AI, but using AI does not negate the human aspect of it. AI hallucinates, it makes mistakes, and I'm not going to be governed by AI. It does help. But Madam Chair, you know what's even more interesting is last week, a lot of these members of the coalition, of your coalition, they were adamant about efficiency and how much we want to be efficient, and yourself and Peter Weaver and a few others even mentioned about asking better questions, right, and etc. But now we have the same faction of the USM that's talking about AI, right, asking questions like, how many vacancies we have in the budget, and then 2 questions later, answering their own questions. That's inefficient, right? So when you have an MP talking about using AI for efficiency, I would say use an example yourself. Another question about do we as Parliament have to bring any legislation for revenue-generating measures? The budget itself says there's no new policy, so there's no new revenue-generating measures and no new legislation. So again, I appreciate when MPs could talk about AI and the use of AI and how we should use it, but then be an example yourself. Be efficient yourself. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, MP Iran. MP Roseberg, I guess you have a sort of a response, and I say this because actually, members of Parliament, it was not the intention that we have a debate here this afternoon. The only question that factions are asked to answer, and which I've heard some factions say, is that we submitted in writing questions to you, to us here, and they are not reflected in the document. That's what we came here to understand. If they are reflected, the request is that we ratify this report of questions. And I stress it because the impression is being created that we have information from the government that we are rushing through and not handling. The only thing this committee has in front of it today are the compilation of the questions by the factions and members of Parliament. That's what we have before us. And some members have been able to already do a deep dive into all of the questions, it would seem. Given that, and the request for at least an hour to determine whether questions were omitted by members of Parliament, if that is what this committee desires, I have absolutely no problem with it. And we could do that because already in hearing some of the questions of which it is being said were omitted, it appears not to be the case. With that, I will adjourn for 5 minutes, and then we shall come back and decide until when we will adjourn. Do we do it for an hour? Do we do it in the middle of recess? Do we do it at the end of recess, before the recess, what the case may be? Whatever the members of Parliament decide that it's, we would want to handle to ratify the report of questions to send to the government, then that is what it shall be. So we're going to adjourn now just for 5 minutes. We come back. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, not only that, it is a summary.
Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this meeting, CC number 23 for today, Monday, July the 6th. We're discussing the report, the draft final report consisting of questions by members of Parliament on the draft National Budget 2026. Now it has been established 292 pages of questions on the draft budget 2026 in the month, the starting of July we're in, and we have a document of 292 pages with questions on the budget 2026. Given the request by some factions in here, I shall adjourn this meeting until 4 p.m., given 1 hour for factions to make sure that they're looking at the amended document, the one of 292 pages that you receive at about 2 o'clock, a few minutes after 2 to be exact. And we will now adjourn, and hopefully members can establish one of 2 things. 1, all the questions are in the report. If not all are, those questions can then be given through, and we shall then amend this 292-page document again to include what factions are saying are missing and which they had already given in. So with that before us, we shall adjourn until 4 p.m. Meeting adjourned. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this Central Committee meeting of Parliament, Central Committee meeting number 23, a continuation of the discussion on the draft budget 2026. The intention of this part of the meeting, which commenced a few days ago, is to ratify the questions as submitted by members and factions of Parliament in order to send the ratified questions, the final report from Parliament, to send that to the government. That would then have to prepare the answers and return these to Parliament in writing as a final note or answer to our report with the questions. We had an adjournment in order to allow the members some time to go over the document that contains the questions by the factions, the document of 292 pages that I referred to before we had the adjournment, and there was an addition from the up faction that was added after the version we, members of Parliament, received last night. So that is what the adjournment was for. I now ask the factions of Parliament if in their quick review of the document, if there is anything that they would like to be added to this document before it is ratified by the Central Committee meeting. And when I say anything to be added, of course, if you have found questions that have not been included, which you posed in writing, and they're not included in the report, if those can be indicated to, so that then this report can be adjusted with whatever was in the view of the faction left out of the report. So I look to the members and see if there's any need for that. I don't see any member requesting such. I do see a member requesting such, and that is MP York. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to yourself, Griffier, and colleagues and the viewing public. Madam Chair, I don't necessarily have anything to add concerning your question. I just didn't know if you were going to close the meeting after that, yes or no. But the only thing I have reservations with would be the following. In the email we received this morning and in your explanation this afternoon, I understood that depending on when the ministers will be able to answer the questions would determine whether we start with the debate on time or not, or whether that's going to be delayed. I understand that part. But earlier, you also explained that this time, this go-around has had more questions than what is usually a custom or expected from the CC, given that we're doing it differently this time. You also said that normally is not, during the old system was already strenuous and kind of, cutting it close. Now, in the same breath, later on you did say, hey, but we have more questions as well. If it was already strenuous before and we have more questions now, don't you think it would be a bit more, I don't want to use the word logical, but let's say the word efficient, if we already include that in the deliberations now being, hey, maybe 2 weeks is indeed too short, right? And maybe extend it to a third week. That way we can guarantee most likely that we'll be able to pick a date where the public meeting will be able to start. And when we all can proceed in the coming weeks knowing like, hey, 90% chance the budget is going to start on this day, instead of how it is right now where it's practically 50-50 up in the air, pushing towards it won't be able to start on that date. So I think if we can come to a more efficient date, given the fact that we have all these extra questions, I think that would be more fruitful moving forward. And instead of, on another topic, crying over spilled milk being the whole back and forth of time to go over the questions that were sent back in the final report, I would like to put in a request, and I would also like to hear your opinion on that, for the next budget, the budget 2026, if we can come to an agreement that we get minimum 24 hours to 48 hours of time to peruse the final report. So we all know in advance, hey, with the final report, we will get X amount of time, and then we'll be able to plan accordingly. So if you could do that, if you could be a bit more efficient and we could come to an understanding now for the next time, I think that's in everybody's benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. Both your points have been noted. With respect to the first one, the time period of 2 weeks was actually indicated before we had all of the questions, and we just maintained that. However, what we will surely do is, if this report is ratified today and received by the government, immediate contact would be made with the government in terms of the feasibility of the 2 weeks or not, and then surely that the date will be amended accordingly if necessary, and that will be communicated to members of parliament as soon as we receive that indication from the government, an indication as to how much time they believe they would need in order to respond to all of the questions. So the minute that information is had from the government, it will be communicated as a continuation of the email in which indeed the 4th of August was mentioned as the date for the public handling. So again, it is not Parliament's insistence on the date, and now that the final report will go to the government, the minute that it is ascertained from the government how much time they need, because after all it depends on them to answer these questions, then that will be communicated. I hear your point, and I can understand your point with respect to knowing as soon as possible whether August 4th is a date that should be kept under consideration by members for the commencement. And again, if the government says or requests 3, then of course we move it down to the following week. That's one point, and your other point is taken into consideration. Normally, these reports with the questions by members of parliament is basically ratified at the same time. But again, I agree this one was extraordinary in terms of the amount of questions posed and the compilation of a quite comprehensive report. So that pertaining to your second question about at least 24 hours to review, that of course would depend on the document that we have before us. Sometime in the same meeting, you could get a ratification of the final report of a CC on a draft national ordinance. Both of your points are noted, MP York. The MP York, do I see you maintaining the request for, I see you still want the floor?
Yes, ma'am.
MP, you have the floor, MP York.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the reply. The sentiment for the whole reason for the first one, my first point, was to try to avoid for lack of a better term, the wait and see approach. Because yet I'm going to be leaving, or we're going to be leaving the meeting, still waiting to see what's going to happen. And I think that's, if we could try not to be reactive and be proactive with the approach, I think if we allow the government more time and for them to say, hey, we don't need it, that's one thing. But for us to already give 2 weeks, according to the math and the logic that you shared with us earlier, that I agree with, if it already was not enough time prior to this extraordinary amount of questions, it will surely be not enough time now. So I don't know why we have to sit down and wait on the government to tell us what we already know. I'm just looking for more clarity without having to wait and see what the government is going to say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you once again, MP York. And as I indicated, there will be no time in between when we communicate with the government and when we communicate that to the members of parliament, because we are saying maybe 3 and it might be 4. So let us just get an indication from the government, and then our schedule will be communicated to all members of parliament immediately upon the receipt of that information. Are there any other comments on the report before us? I don't see any others. Then I will consider this report to be approved by the Central Committee, to be ratified rather by the Central Committee, and thus the report will be sent to the government as the final report on the budget 2026. This report is hereby established as the final report of the Central Committee meeting of Parliament on the draft budget 2026. Members of Parliament, we have, with this last point on this particular agenda, come to the end of the Central Committee meeting number 23 to finalize today, Monday, July the 6th. I want to thank all members of Parliament for your presence and participation on this issue. And to the listening public, I want to thank you for being tuned in to this meeting. And this meeting of Parliament, the Central Committee meeting of Parliament, is hereby closed. Meeting closed.